Welcome to Disclosure Network New York. Today is Sunday, April 17th, 2019. dnny is a grassroots organization now celebrating our 18th year of providing 2 meetings a month throughout the year in Manhattan. We focus on cutting-edge UFO ET issues, paranormal phenomenon, and related subjects, and there are many. Our members do intense investigative research into these various topics and share that information with the group at our meetings and also with our internet followers. Our motto right from day one is, quote, connecting the dots to seek truth, unquote. We have available to everyone worldwide a dnny News Blast email service focusing on the topics of special interest. That service is totally free. Just visit us at our website, which is www.dnny.info, and type in your email address where it's asked for. You'll be immediately connected to us. You'll be receiving emails on various topics, very time-sensitive topics, I may add. It's a gold mine of knowing what's going on. A lot of this is not going into the mainstream press ever. Now, our featured guest speaker for today's meeting is Michael Weeks. A very warm welcome to you, Michael.
Thanks.
Give my hand, please. Now, I always like to start this talk with a quick interview about some basic questions about your past history, so we know a little bit more about you. So we're going to, Michael, start right off at the very beginning and ask you, where were you born?
I was born in New York City.
Where?
We moved quite a bit, though, when I was younger. I ended up settling in San Francisco when I was 9.
Okay, and Mike, talk up really loud so they can hear you back, all right? Okay, and was your family a large family? Was it just you?
Family of 6. I have 1
6?
brother and 2 sisters.
Wow, okay. And did you stay where you're talking about, or did you move around a lot?
Once we got to San Francisco, it was kind of hard to leave. When you get to San Francisco in the 1960s, when things were affordable and the middle class could have a life, it's a pretty good town. And we were there, I was there probably 20 years because I stayed to go to college there at Berkeley and then moved on from there. And in mid-1980, went out to graduate school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I studied playwriting.
Oh, really?
At Carnegie Mellon.
Excellent, excellent. I didn't know that. All right, and so when did you come to here in New York City?
Came to the New York area in 1991, chasing around theater stuff for a while, finally gave up on that. Remember, of course, where I was working for the mainstream media, which was Parenting Magazine for 11 years.
That was an education, I can imagine.
Yes, well, it's true. Since I was a young parent, you've seen my son here at these meetings from time to time, and so I was getting a lot to know about that stuff. Getting a lot of freebies, I might add, too, which is a nice thing about working on a magazine. But, yeah, and remembering where I was when I got out of the subway and all the fire engines were heading downtown. And since I know I'm going to be asked, where did all this interest in ETs came up for you?
That was my next question.
I will say probably 911 and 911 Truth.
I can imagine that would be true. Yeah, I think a lot of us, I think that was a focal point on so many levels when we were getting information that made absolutely no sense on any level. And we were saying, why is we being fed that? And who's behind that? And I've been going to meetings at the Quaker Church here in New York for the 9/11 Truth Movement. And that's quite an amazing group. We're going to have them, by the way, here in about 2 months. The lawyers and some of the other people associated with the 9/11 Truth. Don't miss that meeting. These people are heroes wanting to get to the truth. And they're getting close. They already have going to be a hearing in major courts about the new information that they found that can't be denied. So there's a lot going on. Okay, so you've been doing that. Have you ever seen any UFOs yourself?
No, when we were in Pittsburgh, a suburb, one time during July 4th, it was obviously fireworks time, but something went overhead and I was not paying attention, but my son, who's been here sometimes, Jonah, was paying attention and described it, and a young man who was kind of an internet geek and a science geek was listening to him saying, yeah, you saw a UFO. You didn't see anything that was really a plane or anything. It was moving like this. It was doing that. It was that. It's like, you didn't. That was not. You saw a UFO. That's all there is to it. That was it.
To a lot of people, the first time you see it, you're just so taken back, and you're trying to somehow explain it to yourself rationally that maybe this is some kind of a new airplane, this might be some light coming, maybe it's a comet or something, and then when nothing like that makes sense, and then there's a moment of an aha moment when you say, oh my God, that's a UFO. And how many people in the room have had a sighting at least once in their life? Well, most of the people here. Then you know what I'm talking about. Your life has changed and you'll never be the same. You couldn't be. Because now there's something on the table that wasn't there before. Oh, anyhow, so all right, so great. I'm glad that happened to you. Now, Michael, your talk is so interesting. The title that you chose was No ETs, question mark. William, is it line?
Just line.
And the phenomenon of denial, which is quite a title. So, if you will, go ahead and start. And please keep your voice really loud, because we want to have everybody in the room hear you.
Okay, has anybody heard of William Line? I'm just curious. William Line, it's not exactly a household name in the ET world. And what happened is I've spoken in the past, and so has my son, about Ray, who is our ET contact. And Ray met William Line back in the 90s. And one day, Ray was told, get in a cab, meet me at such and such corner. And Ray went, well, okay, and went off. And Line gets out of the cab, hands this to Ray, and says, thank you, and leaves. And I said, like, what is this? Well, as it turns out, this was in 1993. He didn't have it published. I mean, you can see this is an unpublished version of his book called Space Aliens from the Pentagon. Okay, what is the implication? The implication is there are no space aliens. It's all Pentagon created. They've made every single one of these flying saucers, and you know why? You know why? You can hand this around to people. I've got some handouts that says, this is how you make a flying saucer. Now, I'll tell you, I looked at it and said, damn, that's technical. But it's very impressive. If you want to have a sort of a gander at it and just sort of pass it around and look at it and say, and bring it back to me, it's fine. That's what he's got. He's got his, I know that they're all human made, and I know we made it from Tesla technology, and I'll tell you why, because I can do it. Well, that's an interesting guy. Here's a little, I'm going to get a little bit into his background. He grew up in the Southwest Texas. A lot of military stuff, a lot of stuff in his background that suggests that, you know, he saw a lot. And in fact, he knew that many people, as he was a young man, he's 80 now. So yeah, it was like 1947, 48, 49 was when all the hotbed stuff was going on. So he's like 15, 16, he's waiting to see it. A flying saucer, damn it. You know, I live in this area, I gotta be able to see a flying saucer. And he said finally at an ice cream party that we had every year, boom, there it was. And by that time he's 18, he gets to see it and he says, I think I know how that works. Because he's got that kind of mind. So that all started out, and he says, all that happened, folks, is Tesla had it all for us, laid it all out, we just apply it, the result is what we've got as a result are these flying saucers floating around. They're made from technologies that the Nazis got, and they sold it back to us, and we've been using it ever since. We'll get to the Nazi stuff and the technology presently. I am not going to drop that one. Anyway, his 3 books he's written pretty much have the same message. Technology is way ahead of what we think it is. Hey, I didn't say I disagree with everything William Line said. I think William Line is saying there are no aliens. We'll get to that presently too, because there's, as I promised Nick, there is a punchline to this one, especially with what happened to Ray. So he says it's total baloney. It's some sort of brainwashing propaganda by the elite. He talks a lot in this book about the Illuminati, this, and he says, you know, look at this book, and you say a lot of his work now can be found on PDF files. He has a website. He's 80. He hasn't posted it for about 3 years or so. I have not read any obituaries. He's noteworthy enough. You think, well, you put his name in, some dead person would show up, but he seems to still be alive and kicking. But he had all the stuff about how you make flying saucers. And there's photos and information. And at this particular point, when this came out, probably in the 90s, if you were to talk about it, you could be in trouble. And especially knowing Line, as you're going to know him, he knew that. He knew that. But he wanted very badly to tell what he did have. So anyway, I got a lot of tidbits from this book. You don't have to buy it. He's got 3 books, and they all seem to say mostly the same thing. He did a rewrite. Essentially, this book, Space Aliens from the Pentagon, is a rewrite of his Pentagon Aliens. It's called Space Aliens from the Pentagon. Flying saucers are man-made machines powered by electricity. That's his title, subtitle, and so forth. So he's making his case, his argument right away here. So I thought I'd share with you some fun tidbits because, you don't have to read this book. There's an awful lot of technical stuff. He's a very smart man. And he's got a lot of stuff where he says, well, and I studied this and I worked on this and this, and okay, I believe you, and so forth. But there's just so much stuff. I'm interested in hidden history. That's another one of my passions is, you find out about that. I think like Kat McGuire, who was here, very much into that,
my
very
God.
much going outside the whole.
What really went down as opposed to the official version?
Exactly. I keep saying
unbelievable.
It can go on and on and on.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's got some interesting stuff, so I'm going to share it with you.
Can you just slow down a little bit because I'm having trouble
Okay.
hearing you.
A little
Okay.
slower.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm having
So-
trouble following
Is the
you.
volume okay, guys? Back there.
Anyway.
You all right with the volume?
Yeah, just need him
Oh,
to slow down
Just
a
a
little
little
bit.
slower. Okay, Mike, if you will.
Fine. So
Thank you.
anyway, I just wanted to talk about these tidbits. The idea that we're going to get disclosure and all the lights will be turned on just from that. We're not really. We're going to get pieces. We're going to get, hopefully, what I want to see, what many of us want to see is the hidden technologies come forward and come and help the mass majority of the population. And I just listened to an interview with Emery Smith. And that's another thing about me. I'm always trying to keep up with the latest interviews and the latest this and the latest that. So if you have any questions about what's going on down, you can say anything for me. Hey, I might be able to say, well, this is what I've heard lately. And, as I almost feel like segueing, but everyone's heard the Linda Moulton Howe business of late, I hope. All the stuff about Spartan 1 and Spartan 2. If you have not, please go check it out online, her interview about Spartan 1 and Spartan 2, these two people who've been to Antarctica and seen quite a lot.
We recently just posted something from Linda Howell on video. Does everybody get a copy of that? I sent it out a couple of days ago. Very interesting. She's a wonderful researcher.
Well, she's been around a long time at it. It's one of those veterans of the field and all that kind of thing. So, and I listened to an interview with Emery, and he was asked where he thought the first advancement would come from. He said there's all this stuff hidden away that they're not letting us have, the corporations won't let us have, the elite won't let us have. He says, where is it going to come from? He said, I think it's water. I think the next technology will clean up water around the world and desalinization will become cheaper because of advancements in technologies. By the way, I like to segue and go into tangents periodically, as you see. Even when I wrote down, I said, oh, I'm sorry, this is a tangent. But there is an email blast I get from a group call from a guy who runs something called Abundance Insider. And all of his high-tech news items are either fascinating as all get out or scary as all get out. But I recommend them because they kind of make you think and go, oh no, or oh yes, either way. And it's pretty interesting that
Would you
way.
repeat that and address that slower so we can all get that?
Abundance, live in abundance. This is what we want, obviously. Abundance Insider. And so what it is news items pertaining to major advances in technology, be it medical, be it genetic, be it everything you can imagine, business, things related to business, and so forth. So Emery thought it would be something to do with water as a start. I know Robert David Steele, that's another person I like to look at. He's calls himself alt-right. His website, he thinks it's going to be free energy, and he's hopeful it'll be free energy because that'll allow for, suddenly desalinization doesn't cost anything. It's powered by free energy and so forth. But that free energy begins to free the world. Obviously, people have had, and William Lyne himself, he invented some things. And as soon as he did, he found there were some people trying to poison him. This is what happens to people who try to invent free energy devices and so forth. I'm going to get back to Mr. Lyne. Here, as I said, he hasn't really talked much lately. He went to a conference in Idaho in 2015, and now we're going to get into the history stuff that can be kind of juicy and fun. Apparently, a prominent Nazi hunter was at this conference. I wouldn't say Nazi researcher, hunter. If anybody saw on what the Ancient Aliens did, History Channel, thank you. If anyone saw on History Channel something called Hunting Hitler, came about 2 years ago or something maybe, and it was all about going down to Argentina and finding all these haunts where Nazis had lived and so forth, and the guy who ran it was named Cooper. The guy who was in charge of this whole project was a guy named Cooper. So Cooper shows up in Idaho, and Lyne, knowing what he knows, had a big fight with him. let me go really quickly. We'll get to the fight in a minute. It had to do with Cooper saying all these Nazis went down to Argentina, including Hitler, and William Land saying, ha, 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 no. So we'll get to that. He knows his background was in West Texas and the oil booms. He was also in Air Force intelligence. This is important to remember. He adds proudly that he would never have accepted an invitation to the CIA because he thought they were a criminal outfit. So you see, there's duality to people. You know, just because he's in intelligence doesn't mean, but there is some rivalry. And I always call the CIA the corporate intelligence agency of the Dulles brothers, Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles. But here's a story of how he was in the military. He dropped out of high school in 1956 because he said, I got to do my military service and we aren't at war. Good time to go to the military, right? Not fighting anybody. I could just do my time, get out, and we won't be fighting anybody. Works for me. And he was interested by that point in flying saucers. He joined the Air Force, and he went to a base in Biloxi, Mississippi. He was figuring he was going to do, brainy work for the Air Force. The kind of thing, well, I fixed things, I do this, and so forth. And Arthur C. Clarke, everybody know who he is, right?
Yep.
Came to give a talk he was from the British Interplanetary Society, came to give a talk at the base. And Arthur C. Clarke said, there are no such thing as flying saucers. And so, after the talk, waited in line and said, hi, Mr. Clarke. Hey, that was a really great talk, but you're a goddamn liar. You know there are man-made flying machines powered by electricity. And Arthur C. Clarke just shook his hand, giggled, and 2 days later, William Lyne was moved to intelligence in the Air Force. Damn, that was fast. I mean, somebody talked to somebody in a hurry and moved him out of regular Air Force and said, we're going to need to keep this guy a little bit quiet. And the way you do that is move them into intelligence. And you got to make them sign non-disclosure agreements. It works for me. It smarts me. He said, I was cleared for top secret. Whoa. That's pretty good. So he's in the Air Force intelligence, and he gets a whole lot of information about flying saucers and continues to say, well, they're either the Nazis or the United States, one or the other. And in a way, as you'll see, it didn't make much difference whose they were. So let's get back to the dispute in Idaho with the Nazi hunter. Mr. Lyne maintains that Werner von Braun, who we knew as somebody who came over on Operation Paperclip to work on our rockets, was actually living most of the time in the Santa Fe, New Mexico area in the 1930s and shipping back and forth to Germany during the war.
I'm not sure, can you please slow down a little bit because I'm having trouble following what you're saying. I know you're excited about the topic, but if you can
No, I think that's what happens
slow
sometimes
down
with
a little
speakers.
bit,
They get so excited that they start going really fast.
Yeah, because I
and
can't
they can't hear
follow
it.
what he's
So
saying.
Michael, just slow
Yeah,
it a little
okay.
bit. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't mean to be rude.
so-
No, not at all.
I'm just
Well-
having trouble following.
If you can't hear anything, raise your hand so I can. A little bit. Okay, a little bit louder and slower.
So-
Much slower.
In
Much
theater, they say
slower.
faster
Much
and funnier.
Yeah, much
Slower and louder.
Okay. So
Please go ahead.
in any case, when I get to my second man, since I have 2 people I'm talking about, I'm also going to talk about William Tompkins. I know that Nick sent 3 interviews with him, a sequence of 3 interviews via email to you all. If you saw them, great. But what was going on is what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of misdirection and a lot of, I call it denial that was going on. And Werner von Braun was kind of the face of the United States secret space program. But was he really the top scientist? Many people found Dr. Debus was in fact, William Tompkins found out that Dr. Debus was in fact the brains behind a lot of what was going on in Alabama. Since back then, the space station was the space headquarters in Huntsville, Alabama, NASA. At any rate, here's what he had to say about von Braun. Baron von Braun was in charge of a flying saucer project using technology stolen from Tesla called P2. I heard that in terms of the Freemasons and being a very elite Illuminati group that existed. And it's based right now in Italy. I don't know if it's by the Vatican. I don't know if it still is, but he says it's been carefully concealed, the existence of P2. When Baron von Braun was revealed, as I said, several women in Santa Fe said, oh, he was quite the worker. I mean, he put moves on a lot of gals around here back in the 1930s. We remember him well. And he moved freely back and forth from Germany, where he ran their top secret rocket center, and then came back to Los Alamos to run ours, as he says, with the facility of a gazelle leaping a small creek. Von Braun was not an inventor, more of a pusher on projects, i.e. the PR guy behind. See what I mean? And he says the control of this project was held by all the major players: Hitler, Einstein, Himmler, David Rockefeller, just to name a few. This is what he says. This would explain von Braun's international cha-cha. The story of Los Alamos being a boys' camp before the war is just one more chapter in the book of the big lie. They wanted to justify huge government expenditures on projects which had been already developed. So, that was what he had to say, and I'll read even more about this whole, what happened at the end of, what did he call World War II? Oh, it was something that was like episode or something. He didn't even call it war. It was just very interesting. But in any case, he calls this group a secret trilateral commission. Back then, that was considered the dirty words, like the Illuminati, like the one of these people who all met, and our Council on Foreign Relations, things like that. This is what, so he had a whole lot of suspicion of people in power and of the elite and so forth. So that was all there. But let me go back to Mr. Cooper and Hitler fleeing to Argentina. Mr. Lyons said the story was totally unnecessary. The United States wanted the technology back that Germany had developed from the Tesla theories. A lot of you probably even heard that, well, beginnings of ET technology and saucers was Germany, Nazi Germany. That's probably something you can look up. That essentially what happened is the elite sold it to Germany, and Germany realized they could not apply it to win the war in Germany, and so they sold it back to the United States in order to get amnesty for their leaders and hide them away.
What?
And send amnesty for their leaders in order to get them out of Germany for all the, even though they've done horrible things. Let me read this little section here. Oh, I'm sorry, pulled the wrong page. Here we go, 77. In 1945, as the Russians encircled the Berlin bunker, test pilot Hannah Reich and Colonel Hans Ulrich, who had made many flights to Feuerland, Tierra del Fuego, southern tip of South Africa, rescued Adolf and Eva Hitler, carrying them to the safety of a bristling Nazi armada near Neuschwabenland, German Antarctica, containing the secret Nazi superfortress and flying saucer bases established in 1938, stocked with supplies and heated by almost unlimited natural gas. After the stalemate, the Hitlers returned to Germany with secret Allied protection. The bases are probably now maintained under joint trilateral ex-Nazi control. Remember, this is written in the 80s, 90s. The Deutsche Antarktische expedition laid out Germany's claim to part of Antarctica, which has since remained undisturbed. In the last coded messages from Martin Bormann, references to Tierra del Fuego were made. The reins of power were transferred to Reich Chancellor Dönitz as 24 German U-boats surrounded the United States, armed with ICBMs. B-2s carrying neutron bomb warheads. Everybody remember the neutron bomb way back? It said would only kill people and wouldn't kill buildings and so forth, and with celestial guidance systems. From this possession of strength, Admiral Dönitz negotiated with the Allies during a stalemate. The Russians were overrunning Germany, but Germany had its nuclear missiles trained on the heart of America. If Germany fired the missiles, the Russians would take all of Germany. and all would be lost for the Germans, who could have bombed America and would have had nowhere to go. Whew. Under the circumstances, only America could save half of Germany. East Germany, West Germany. And so a deal was cut. Certain conditions were stipulated, and Dönitz was required to scuttle all U-boats with all hands on board. Wow, pretty good deal as part of the amnesty. Certain people were guaranteed amnesty, including Adolf Hitler, who, with Eva, were secretly provided with a secure home in Kassel, Germany, for the rest of their lives. And that is why he's at that conference and somebody's saying, Argentina? Oh, no, you don't understand. He was left in Germany. Everybody just buttoned their lip. And here's where it gets really fun. In 1967, the Hitlers were invited by President Lyndon Johnson to be his guests during Hemisphere, the World's Fair in San Antonio, Texas. The main tower of the Hemisphere was designed by an architect who'd been a high-ranking member of the SS. As I, meaning William Lyne, sold paintings with a friend, Adolf and Eva came by us, and I spotted them the minute they came into view. I had just been talking to a German engineer when I suddenly realized a security agent the moment I spotted with the Hitlers. And Hitler took an interest in a particular painting of the Moritz von Schwind variety. When he saw that I recognized them, he and Eva were quickly whisked away by their security agents. My friend Bob, also an Air Force intelligence personnel who sat next to me, agreed we saw what we saw. This event was followed up by other security agents who came by and talked to us to debrief us. We played it cool. I mean, what else could we do? We said anything about it. Who would have believed us? And so then he goes on talking about General Patton. There's a lot about Patton and how he was killed twice, I believe. They said the first time it failed, he had a car accident, and he was still alive, so they had to go in and kill him in the hospital to make sure. And they talked about the neutron bomb, and, oh yes, what happened at Los Alamos? Working in rocketry in New Mexico was the late Peter von Dresser, originator of von Dresser's constant, a mathematical constant which von Braun and others used to calculate trajectory of rockets. And he's one of these guys who is kind of like Tesla. He got none of the glory and none of the fame. Apparently he knew all how to run certain pioneer rocket research. Goddard got all the credit for it. And the result was, and Goddard got all the funding from the government, Goddard got all the defense backing, and Van Dresser said, I can do it better, and he was ignored. And of course, at the time he mentions, oh, by the way, Van Dresser was Jewish, and he was ignored. So, getting on with this, more tidbits. Edward Teller, everybody know who Edward Teller is? He was the founder of the H-bomb. He was considered by many of us who follow left-wing politics as a pro-nuclear and right-winger in the Reagan era. Apparently, he has one very good quote to his credit, not unlike James Forrestal. You do all remember James Forrestal. James Forrestal was Secretary of the Navy under Roosevelt and Secretary of Defense under Truman. James Forrestal was very much an ET insider. He knew a lot. In fact, that is why they say he was killed. He was pushed out of his hospital on the 6th floor. At any rate, Teller has said, all the secret information owned by the government belongs to us, the people. We paid for it. It should be made available to us within 1 year of the date of the government getting it. Hey, that sounds like something I can get behind. And of course, that got Teller in hot water, and he had to stay quiet on the matter afterwards. But he is supposedly said this. And Lyne also says Tesla's personal papers are in secret vaults in Los Alamos. Lyne goes on to talk about how he was poisoned a couple times by people who didn't like his free energy technology, and his family life is destroyed by forces beyond his control. Many people who get into this business, that is what happens. Their family life gets destroyed. So he also had a lot of thoughts about the JFK murder, which he predicted 2 days before it happened. He says that what happened with JFK is that he hired the usual suspects who were fascist horrors, but then he kept firing them. Like he woke up and said, oh my God, who did I just hire here? And he got rid of them. And so as a result, he had to go because the people who were his right-hand people were turning out to be traitors or people not interested in the good of the United States. He also, line points out that Kennedy's big brother Joe, which I had heard before, was supposed to be the presidential candidate. You know, his dad wanted Joe to be the president, but Joe was shot down in Germany and killed. This was an accident. He was not meant to be shot down. Why? Because he was in the elite. There was a POW camp in Germany in which the elite who were brought down, were brought in, sent to this camp, treated like royalty, and then dismissed after the war. They all went on to high positions in the U.S. industry. He's saying that at least 6 of these people who got special treatment, even in war. And then he concludes his book by writing about, as I said, how to build a flying saucer. He said, I'm putting it out there for you. If you think my work is good, now you know. This is how it works. So I want to transition from there. We can hang on to a line about that. And I do have a punchline on the line story because of what happened to Ray getting this book handed to him. But I want to transition to William Tompkins. Did anybody see Dick's video interviews with him and Robert Wood? I know he sent them along about a week or 2 ago, and I remember saying, I saw it. Well, I'm going to be bringing him up. Okay. Anyone heard of William Tompkins? Is that William Tompkins? Yes? Couple? Maybe? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. So we got a few. Good. Well, this is his book, Selected by Extraterrestrials. I think that the word selected is a good word. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. He died a couple of years back. He was 94. Even then, because of his status, you say, well, he was old. It's kind of like, did he have to die at that point? What was going on? You just can't ever take, this happened, whatever it was, for granted. That's just the nature of people in this business. You know, when they die, it's like the same as with Schneider and other people who essentially were killed because of what they knew. In any case, there is some interesting historical material that coincided, I found, when I went back and looked between what Mr. Tompkins says and what Mr. Lyons said. Now, Tompkins grew up in the Los Angeles, California area, and that was where, and still is, where defense companies and plants were forever, and have been. And even, you've got all of the bases there and all the plants and so forth. Everybody thinks of California as this, place where everybody goes in the sunshine and you run into hippie types and so forth. So, oh my God, all the money's in defense there. It's a tremendous amount of money in defense. In any case, what happened was he was very good. He had a photographic memory. He would go on battleships and he would look around at them and he'd draw them in detail. He'd just remember everything about them. And they were so good. And he went in front of a classroom, he was like in high school, and he presented it, made the newspaper and so forth. And suddenly one day, the military shows up at his door, knocks on his father's door and says, "Sir, you're under arrest." And his father says, "For what?" He says, "For stealing secrets." And the father says, "I didn't steal any secrets." He said, "Look at these drawings." And it's his son's drawings. And Tompkins says, he's just a good drawer and all that. In the military, finally, after it all shook out, the Navy said, okay. Suddenly, Mr. Tompkins had a job out of high school. He knew where he was going to be. He was going to be working with the Navy. And that's what happened after he was just too clever to not be put into some good high program. And so he ended up being a secretary of sorts. What would happen is, in the early 40s, he was also a witness to the Battle of Los Angeles. If you don't know what the Battle of Los Angeles is, I'm sure there's a whole lot of material out there about it where you can find out about all the people in Los Angeles who watched at night as guns and shots were fired and all at the air, these alleged saucers or whatever they were. They didn't know what they were, and the fight went on into the night. And this was during World War II, so nobody thought too much about it in a way. But he said, what Tompkins said, the curious thing about it is we watched it, and it was very interesting and kind of pretty, but then we got bored and went to bed. What? Yeah, and he says that. He says later, now can you imagine that? here's all this activity going on in Los Angeles, which we could be being invaded by aliens or whomever, and we just sat there and watched and went to bed. And so then we got up later and said, is it still going on? You know, you would think the vast majority of people would be sitting there, you know, and terrified. But this wasn't happening. And that's the story of the Battle of Los Angeles from him. And yet, so he ends up as a secretary of sorts. He's called in for meetings with the admiral, whose name is Rick Obata. Rick Obata's a very interesting fellow because he did not come from classic military background. He went to none of the academies. He had none of the training. And Forrestal, who was at the time Secretary of the Navy, sent him out there saying, I know you don't have any of that brainwashing to you that they give you in the academy. And that's what I like about you. So go out there and do this job of listening to what our the German spies are coming back and telling us. What was happening is the German spies were coming back and talking about the ETs. And Tompkins said he must have gone to, he said something like, I think in the interview he said something like 1,000 meetings. And here is my take on this. The spies are going back and forth to Germany. The Germans, if we believe Mr. Line, were going back and forth working on different nuclear projects in this country and that country without any allegiances whatsoever. Now, just because these spies were German-American, could speak German, that they could go back and forth freely without anyone getting arrested or shot or court-martialed in Germany, take them away, a spy. They didn't catch any of them. Just something doesn't quite work here. But the thing is, the last thing the Germans wanted was to be overrun by the Russians. They figured out they had a chance with the United States. So they took it, they won the war, and moved all their higher-ups to the U.S. You notice why I said they won the war? Who was I talking about? They moved everybody over to the U.S. and South America and took over. Who was the head of the cocaine trade in South America? Why, Klaus Barbie. Klaus Barbie, the Nazi, very well known in our Nazi lore. And suddenly after the war, we're suddenly talking all about Roswell crashes and other crashes, and the Admiral Byrd trip down to Antarctica to fight that big battle against the Nazis, and then Truman coming back to Truman. Truman says, how bad is it, Admiral? And Admiral says, really bad. And then Eisenhower comes along and says, well, if we're going to get along as a society, we just better cooperate with them. So Emery Smith said, also in the interview, he says, you have to understand, there's an iPhone 20 out there. It just hasn't, they don't need to pull it out yet. And that is the sensibility we have to think about with all this stuff, is if they're saying, oh, we can 3D print human parts of the bodies, and they are starting to say that now, how much more can they do? The answer is, sky's the limit. The hidden technologies are so advanced. It's just the biggest red pill we can possibly need to take, is that we could have a totally different world. That's kind of why I do this, is kind of why I'm interested. If the powers that be allowed it, if we could trumpet somehow that this is going on. But we've got the psychopaths and the sociopaths running the show. So let me get it back to Tompkins and his book, because it's slapped together in a very confusing fashion. I wouldn't rush out and buy it, but there's so many gems in it. It's kind of like, if only you could just find the right page and turn to it and so forth. I really like his quote, what we know is dwarfed by what we all have to learn. That's what he found out when he was in the programs. The other thing was, as he talked about LA, he talked about his involvement in the back end. What happens is, Mr. Tompkins found out that people were invading his brain. Well, people. He was just getting visions. He turned out to be a very good remote viewer. I know we had remote viewing as a subject here. I wasn't able to go that. And he was very good. What would happen is people would just come in, beings would come in and tell him something. You go, oh my God. And so, for example, he's sitting at a coffee break, and he just says, it's not ours. And his coworker says, what are you talking about? The moon, it's not our moon. He says, oh, come on. Well, Mars' moon brought to Mars. They have it. It's a station. No, seriously, it's going to flash. It's not even a moon. It's a station. Oh, come on, Bill. There's no trains running on the freaking moon. Okay, take it easy. I mean an alien naval operating facility, an alien naval base, and there ain't no cheese there either. Was this flash of yours in color or in black and white? Oh, that's why flashes are in color. Oh, so what alien navy swiped our moon? No, it was never our moon. Aliens towed it here from a pickup from another sector of the galaxy several years ago, like 10,000. Oh, well, now you're just too far out for me. No, it has no core. It's filled with massive cities. Cities? Let me help you. You're right. Before you faint. No, I'm okay. It's like 48 states inside there. I mean, I can see it. There's thousands of structures, massive open areas. And so he goes on and sees these things, and this kind of pops out, and all the workers are like, Jesus, what are you telling us here? This is nuts. And then what's also interesting is how they caught on to him. All the elite people at Douglas Aircraft caught on to his talents. They said, look, you don't have any PhD, you're a designer, but every time you come to the room, you present us with something we kind of went, damn, we didn't think of that. That's a great idea. And wow, you're really outside the box on this one. He just consistently was outside the box on everything. He doesn't say brag, it just was what happened. He would say, this is what I did, this is what I found out, and so I talked about this, and they said, oh, that's a really good idea. So, no, I got the moon one. I've already done the moon one. Yeah, the moon concurs also. Linda Moulton Howe has an interview in which she was told what's in the moon too. It concurs totally with what Tompkins says. The trip to Huntsville, Alabama. He had to go to Werner von Braun and Kurt Debus in Alabama in 1960, whatever, and say, your plans for your rockets stink. Now, he works for Douglas, and Douglas is really not supposed to be doing that sort of thing. And in fact, Douglas was probably going to, and Douglas did within a few months fire him for it. But he said, I have to go and tell them. And a lot of what's in this book is flirty blonde secretaries who, it turns out, were all Nordics. Nordics. Because after a while, he said, oh, they can't, they would know so much more than anybody. They knew more than everybody. He just said it happened regularly, and then some new one would come in, and and so on. And then eventually, he said, because of his viewing skills, he was able to find out that yes, indeed, they were blonde Nordic women coming in there, being cute and seductive, and making you think, oh, that's how you got into the building because you're hot or whatever. No, they got in because these people needed help, and these so-called blonde, the stereotype bimbo, well, they weren't anything but. They were really smart, and he shows that over and over and over again. He said we needed them; they were just that smart. And in any case, so he's getting ready to go to Huntsville, and he says, I don't know what's going to happen. And his secretary tells him, he says, what you're going to do, he goes through, you're going to land on this from the plane here, you're going to go here, you're going to get in, you're going to rent a truck. It's a truck you're not familiar with driving. You're going to have problems with the stick shift. You're going to take the crate that's going to be going in to show how your presentation is. You're going to go to the military base. They're not going to stop you. They're going to let you right in. And they're going to have to find where Debus and Braun are. It's hidden away, but you will find it. And then when you get there, they will just come. They won't have any guns. They won't point them at you. They say, come on in. And they'll bring the crate in for you. And the secretaries will be there. And they'll say, Mr. Von Braun and Mr. Davis have been waiting for you. And they'll let you in. And you get to make your presentation. And this was told to him by the Nordic. And he said, damn it, that is exactly what happened. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked any questions. I just went in there. And that was it. And Von Braun was exactly as I said earlier. He's not the brains. Debus was the brains. And Debus listened. Whoa, this is great stuff. Wow, you got an imagination. This is incredible. This is exactly the way we should do this. It's so much better than anything we've got. We're going to have to do this, definitely. And so he sells them. Douglas gets the contract, and then they fire him. the corporate mentality sort of gone wild. But it didn't matter because one of the alien women said, that's all right, we'll get you another job at North American, whatever it was called. And they did. So he also talks about aircraft carriers that he designed that are a mile long. be up in the sky. Ray has told me himself, he said, yes, when I was driving through Nevada, drove for I knew there was something above my head in the sky. We drove hundreds of miles. It was still there. It didn't move. It hadn't been it was gigantic and so forth. Tompkins also loves to show the pictures, and he did on a cosmic disclosure on Gaia of how we are all being gassed. That essentially we're being sedated, blinded, mind controlled. He always called it mind controlled is what he called it. He said, one day, and he says the ships are, spaceships are crowded. The sky is crowded. They're all up there. We just can't see them. They have cloaking devices like Star Trek and so forth. And that he said, one day, some friends of mine were looking at this property in Southern California that was going to become condos because they were going to buy there, they thought. So they took a whole bunch of pictures of this fairly vacant property. As it turns out, they developed the pictures, and there were all these strange spaceships spewing out gas. And he said what happened was they had turned off, they had put their cloaking devices, but the cloaking devices, they forgot to turn the ones that responded to cameras off, and therefore the camera caught them. And he shows this picture, and there's just all these strange looking spaceships going, spraying stuff all over us. And he says that's what's going on in our life right now. Very interesting. And then, of course, let me wrap up with the moon landing. The moon landing, which is loads of fun. You think you had some fun now. This is where it gets really fun. July 20th, 1969. Nearly all the same people were in attendance as were in attendance for the Commander Schirra Apollo 8 command. Half of TRW, he worked for TRW, big military space company out in California, as usual. When Apollo 11 was preparing to land on the moon, the crew transmitted this message to Apollo Mission Control, and this is in those interviews that he sent you by email. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. These babies are huge, sir, enormous. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there lined up on the far side of the crater edge, sir. They're on the moon watching us. And 600 million people all over the Earth watched it on TV. As they landed, Neil Armstrong climbed down the LEM ladder and said those now famous words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The UFOs are watching us as we're walking on the moon. And when Armstrong was photographing Buzz Aldrin's space helmet, we in TRW could see actual ruins of a former civilization on the lunar surface reflected in his helmet. The alien voice was very clear. Finish a total of 6 of your Apollo missions, take your photos, pick up some rocks, go home, and you don't come back. And he concludes his book by saying, 400,000 people lost their jobs in the space program because we didn't go back. Engineers, skilled people, they're all out of work. He said they were no longer doing it. He said, in 1969, supposedly, our astronauts took pictures of the craters, picked up some rocks, came home, and that was it. Forces greater than the United States government had halted our grandiose plan. And he talks about Bush starting something up, and then Obama canceled something called the Constellation Vehicle. Maybe you guys talked about the Constellation Vehicle back years ago. I've only been coming for a year or two. So let me also say, wind up with a quickie from Cosmic Disclosure, which was where Tompkins still had access, even late in his life, to various secret programs. And he said, right now, they've got this pill they're working on at Scripps. It's a pill that will reduce your age. The male will be 27, the woman will be 22, and it'll happen within a matter of months, and you'll feel really good afterwards. So that's how advanced technology actually probably is. Now, here's the last story before we get to questions. As I told you, William Lightling has made his career, he really hasn't had much of a career ultimately, talking about space aliens from the Pentagon and that they're not from outer space. Ray met William Klein, and William Klein looked at Ray and said, I know who you are. Ray's a little taken aback. What do you say? Let me show you something. Lion takes him over to this. That constellation over there, right? He's like, yeah. Specifically there, right? He's like, yeah. Yeah. Well, we know about you people. Nobody's ever going to know about it. That's just the way it's going to be. You will never, ever be able to tell what you know. That's how we planned it. So Ray, needless to say, figured, oh, William Lyon, Man in Black. That's where I'll cut off.
Whoa, that's you've covered so much material here, and amazing amounts. I'm sure there's questions in the audience, and before we take your questions, I'm gonna have you understand what the rules are, which are going to be strictly enforced. And that is this: please listen, everyone. If you have a question, I want you to form it into one sentence, and when your turn comes up, we'll call you. Say that one sentence to Michael, and then please, after you come up here to say that sentence, go back and sit down as you're listening. Do not do a second and third and fourth sentence on following up. Reason is because time is of the essence, and we want to get as many people who have a question able to talk. So if we go through all the people who want to talk and you have one question, if we have time, you can do a second question, but not when you're up here. Is that understood by everyone?
Yes.
Right? And I'm going to take you one by one, and I know it's going to be difficult to come up here, but don't throw your voice from the back of the room. The microphone is here, so you're going to have to come up. You're going to have to work with these people as they come up. You're going to be first, okay? And I'm sorry you're going to have to pull your chair, but it's there you go. And I'm going to push the table over here more so you can come in. And if you could just say as loud as you can, the mic's right there, Michael's right here. What's your first name and what's your question?
My name is Rena, and the question I have is, have you ever heard of the book called 1945 to 1995, Man-Made UFOs?
Okay.
No, I have not. That sounds fascinating. Tell me about it.
Okay, go ahead.
It was written by a guy who was in World War II, and all his research about what the Nazis did, and when going to Antarctica, and it has schematics of different UFOs that he came in contact with, and it's this thick, and it's really hard to get, but if you can get it,
Is
get
it
it and
on
read it.
Amazon or is there any place like that?
I've never found it on Amazon
No.
or any place. I found it in a little bookstore in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Rena, very much for that. We'll take a look. Hey, please, come up a little closer to the mic, and just very loudly so they can hear you too.
Okay.
Your first name and then.
Nancy. Okay,
Nancy.
I just had a question because I thought that, thank you for the presentation. I thought that the group, they were going to talk a little bit more about, I understand that what you're saying about that the book believing that these technologies were man-made and that they're not, but if you can talk more about the technologies, how the technologies were developed by the ETs and about the ET agenda on this planet, because that's what I thought we were going to be addressing in this
Okay,
group as well, the ET agenda.
gotcha. Thank you for your question. Can you just, I know that's a lot, but can you just touch on it?
I would just say that I believe that there are more than one. There are more than one ET agendas. I'm sorry, I'm saying it all completely wrong. That there isn't one. That obviously those who came in contact with the Nazis had a different agenda, than the Nordics who came into contact with Mr. Tompkins. I think that there are people, and he even says Ike sold us out to the tall grays, not the Nordics, and that was the problem.
Yeah, I mean
So-
the negative ET agenda.
Yeah, that would be a negative.
Enough,
Yes,
don't go back and forth,
that's fine.
please.
The negative, yeah, and so this is the issue: is who are the negatives? Where are they? There is a strong sector of the ET movement presently that believes there are no negatives, and it's kind of like, Well, maybe I know that Emery Smith, for example, said he never encountered anybody negative, and he encountered hundreds of species of aliens in his work, and he just says they weren't all negative. The ones that were negative were people. People were the negative ones, and I understand what he's saying on that front, but that's mainly because probably the programs he was working in reflected that. As far as an overall agenda, well, we're going to see, aren't we? Things are going to start to shaking out, I think. I keep track of a lot of what's going on in the movements, and things have got to start shaking out. I guess within the next, 3 months, Mr. Trump will have cosmic clearance. Apparently he can't have cosmic clearance till he's been 2.5 years in office. Yeah, but he's obviously been told a lot because people have talked about his uncle. And I've heard that he has contacted people like Pete Peterson, who was really big in the Reagan administration, and said, "Hey, Pete, I don't know you, but can you tell me, is all you're saying true?" And Mr. Peterson says, "Yes, Mr. President." He says, "Thank you, that's all I want to know."
And cosmic clearance is the highest level of clearance. Is that right?
I don't think it is.
Oh, really? There's
I
nothing
know,
higher?
it sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? But there are people who will say, "No, I'm actually, so-and-so is actually 10 levels above cosmic clearance." And you kind of go, whoa, that's pretty impressive.
That's interesting if that's true. Any more questions?
Good.
Yeah, go ahead. Please stand up and your first name and your one-sentence question.
Hi, my name is Hal. I've heard the theory before that we were told not to come back to the moon. If that's true, how does that explain the several moon landings that happened subsequently to the first one?
Well, I said, I think it even said, you get to come X number of times. I think it was 6, wasn't it? 6 total, 5 or
not
6.
positive.
You say you can come back 5 or 6 times, then you're done. And the goal, according to Tompkins, was to create a moon base of some kind. And that never materialized. And yet, there's the secret space program, Hal. So maybe the NASA program is one thing, so NASA is often called not a space agency, and so forth, and under the auspices of something of almost a PR thing like Werner von Braun seems to have been. So I don't know what the answer is to that. There obviously were trips, and there may actually be bases there that we have, and we're just not supposed to know about them. We're supposed to know about this one sector, the NASA sector, showing up and being told, no, get out of here. We're already using what people like Corey Goode have been called the dark fleet, which is horrible things going on out in space and Mars and so forth, and slavery and abductions and so forth. So I don't know if there's when we're going to know that. As, okay, so that was stopped because you thought we would do what? That's why we were turned away. Why? When we're already doing this, and this here. And in the 1980s, it was a hotbed, apparently. There was a lot of stuff going on in space, according to the secret space program material.
Okay, you have a question? Come on up. And your first name and your
Hey, my
question.
name is Jim. How you doing?
Hi, Jim.
So you mentioned Donald Trump. My
Right.
question is, what do you think about him creating this whole Space Force? And what does that have to do with the secret space program that's currently going on? And also, I'm sure you've seen the documentary Above Majestic.
Yes.
So if you could comment on that too, that would be great.
Thanks,
Thanks
Jim.
for your question. Go ahead.
I haven't watched. I watched that when it came out. Obviously, it had a lot of material that I was familiar with. I will say William Tompkins was he confirmed much of the stories about programs where your age regressed, 20 and back programs that Corey Goode has talked about. They're both Navy guys. He said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I heard about it. And I do know that I think Above Majestic is there to kind of plant seeds, and which is what I think the Space Force is about ultimately. I think the Space Force is there to plant more seeds. He wants to put the idea that there is something going on already now, but it's kind of like if we put it in front of people enough times, they're going to start to adjust a little better to the idea that we've already had this kind of thing going on for a while. And so that's why this force, and you have to remember also that Reagan in the 80s had that Star Wars Defense Initiative. And I remember being, just like everybody else, say on the left, saying, what a crock of shit, what are we going to do, send a whole bunch of missiles up there to stop Russia? And that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, was because it was all a front. I know because Ray has told me he worked with knew a lot of people in the Montauk Project, a lot of people were involved in designing specific programs and specific, not programs, structures and whatever for the SDI, as it was called, that Star Wars Defense Initiative. But they weren't for that. They were for space stuff, and they just couldn't talk about it because that was top secret.
Yeah, we got a question. Okay, come on, Snap. Just your first name and your question.
Okay, my first name is Anthony, and the question is, to be brief, in your research, how important have the minute details been? Minute details, like very subtle details, because we can talk about this. I uncovered something last night in my own kind of personal life that it's very interesting, and it's something specific, and I'm just asking like how important are minute details. Like if you're looking at pictures or videos or hearing sounds, or especially pictures, like have you ever encountered anything where you kind of like, well, wow, like had to kind of go, well, SHIT moment, like wow?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
I would say almost certainly, because I do constantly. I felt I had that moment here when I compared Tompkins to Line. But I thought, I'm not going to find anything similar. Tompkins totally believes in aliens. His body was inhabited by them pretty much. He told what to do. Also, I didn't bring this up. Tompkins also had a moment where he and his family were off in a car, and they had Henry Hill. What's that couple? Barney Hill. A Barney Hill moment. They were in the car, and suddenly, whoosh, everything stops. Car won't go. Kids are in the backseat freezing their buns off because it's cold. It's up in the mountains, and they're like, "What's going on here?" And he says, "I think about 5 minutes went on by, and then suddenly we were able to go on our way." But he says, "I don't know how long it really was ultimately." So he had that moment happen. So yeah, all these little details you kind of go, huh? But what I find with little details is how do they match up with what other people are experiencing or have said or written about, or do they not match up, and why, and so forth. So we all have to use, and I'll say this again, I sound like I believe everything. You do all have to use discernment. You do have to decide, this doesn't work, that does work, or this doesn't sound right, or maybe there's an agenda here that's kind of dark and not very helpful, and so forth. You got to try to work out. I try to work towards the positive agenda because, I'm an older guy, and politics in this world have been pretty horrible. And so when I went into the whole ET question, I found that it made me a utopian. Because I thought, well, this technology is all out there. We can have a better world. Why don't we? People just need to know that this is possible. I mean, people look at me like, you mean we really could just have printers all over the world printing food and nobody would have to worry about things? Yeah, essentially. And like, it's hard for everybody to process. And would have been hard for me to process years ago, except that I've learned that, everything we've been taught is a lie. The history is a lie. Everything is wrong. And we have to find out what it is, and we'll get partial stuff, and it'll be okay, but it's probably still incomplete.
Yeah, we had the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, who works for MUFON, and she did an interview with our group a while back that was amazing. She's very informed, and it was a fascinating interview. So just want to let that, please.
Yes.
Your first name and very loudly.
My name is Lorraine, and I was doing research. This was very recent. Recently, I did research on Warner von Braun, and what I discovered when I was doing research for John Brown's house, which is in Weehawken, which is what is called Louisa Park. What I discovered I thought was fascinating because Warner von Braun was married to a woman, her name was Quistrop. It's Q-U-I-S-T-R-O-P. Okay? 100 years before that, or maybe a little less than 100 years, his mother, okay, Louisa Quistrop was his wife. His mother was Emmy Quistrop. okay? The same last name, how could that possibly be? And what I discovered is that I think it's all a front. And I also think when they knocked down John Brown's house, okay, John Brown was an activist, he was an abolitionist. Okay, he was actually killed in Levi. Okay, he was killed in the water tower.
So what is your question now?
My question is, how could that be? How could he marry the same woman, okay, 100 years later,
Wow.
okay, with the same last name?
Yeah, that's a great
The
question.
only thing that I could say is that
Thank you.
the whole thing is a lie.
Okay, well, okay, let's, did you have any feelings on that?
And the whole, but it's also the whole issue of cycles and people being reborn as somebody. And here's my 12-year-old telling me yesterday, he says, Dad, he watches a lot of YouTube, I was seeing YouTube about this person who died in 2006. And then somebody was born in 2006, and now they have a picture of him at his age, and he looks exactly like that person who died in 2006.
Right.
Coincidence?
No.
And he says, even at 12, I don't think so. I said, no, Mario, it's not a coincidence. So yeah, it's
Good question. Okay, we
absolutely
got
true.
another hand up. Come on up here. Come on up. It's close to the microphone. And your first name and your one question.
Apulia. I want to go back to Hal's question about the moon landings. The other day, Japan set an explosion on an asteroid. India has a new space program. China is planning to land on the moon. How is that going to work out?
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's quite a question. Do you have any feelings on that?
They are all already there.
Say again?
They are all already there.
There.
If they're involved with the secret space program, the secret space program is not a U.S. thing. It's an international thing.
Oh.
Everybody around, there's people from every country. You can find somebody aware in some level of their government, or maybe even in a private sector,
So
who
they
says,
can land
yes.
on the moon.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
we have to go around again. We'll get to another
Yes.
question.
That's it.
Okay, we get that. Okay, you
Great.
haven't had a chance yet. Can you? All
My
right, thank
name
you.
is
And just
Bob.
really loudly, please. your
My
first
name is Bob, and the question is whether you can tell us a little story from the book, a particular story that I heard on JeffRents.com.
Yes.
William Tompkins has about 30 or 40 hours of his interviews on Rents.com. I listened to all of them. And the most fascinating story to me was when he went with like 20 retired naval pilots that are in a club. They went to a meeting on the top of a mountain. They had to drive up the steep mountain. And they went to a hunting lodge, and the conference room, dining room turned into a UFO, and they went to visit the aliens' home planet. Can you repeat that whole story?
Oh, I'm afraid I don't
Wow.
remember that one. That's a great story, but all I remember from Tompkins is the story about him becoming a Catholic. That's a pretty good story too. Do you know about the story about him becoming a Catholic?
Let's hear that one.
The Catholic story is where he said, well, you know, he married once. He was really in love with his wife, and it was early in the marriage, and she was a Catholic. And they would go to church all the time. And she said, you know, I want to formalize this. I want to become a Catholic. I want to go to school. I got catechism. I want to, you know, make it official. Well, we know about the Catholics, right? We know about the Vatican, right? What happened is he shows up to class with other people wanting to become Catholics, and the priest, I think it was the second string, but the assistant priest or whatever, says, "Oh, Mr. Thompson, come back here with me in the back room. There's something we want to talk to you about." And this is the first day of class. He's like, "Oh, okay." He goes to the back room, and there is the actual priest of that church, the main guy. And he's there saying, "Sit down, Mr. Tompkins." Okay. And there are 3 foreigners sitting there in monk costumes. And they start telling the story of, well, in my home country, and they speak in their languages. They don't speak in English. No, he said one of them did speak English. There are these people that are saying they're being swallowed up by these weird, strange creatures, and they're disappearing off the face of the earth, and so forth. He's getting all these stories about, you know, abductions and horrible beings that are in the deep, dark areas of South America. And they finish the stories, and he's kind of like, okay. And the father says, thank you. And they bring him back, and they say, you don't have to go to class anymore, you're a Catholic now. And he's like, I think they just wanted to put this into the Vatican record and have me there as a witness, because it's probably in their files. That's kind of a funny story, too. I like that story.
Yeah.
I was even thinking about reading that. It was
Yeah, okay.
kind of fun.
Has everybody had one chance yet that wants to talk?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, then please.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to say that,
You have a question?
yeah, it's kind of question,
And
comment,
again, your first name?
comment, Nancy, yeah.
Yeah, Nancy.
Yeah, no, there are secret space programs on the artificial moon, and I know that also because I think I mentioned this in my last time here, that they're utilizing very powerful psychics like myself in those programs, and I, in my very last lifetime, was utilized in Project Stargate, and saw satanic ritual abuse on the artificial moon. So that is what's going on the moon. Those secret space programs are there. I was utilized, unfortunately, to do horrible things to people because they're utilizing psychics in a horrible way. And yeah, so they're on the moon. They're in the artificial moon, and there's satanic ritual abuse going on that moon.
Nancy, at some point, I would certainly love to talk to you because we're planning the schedule for the next few months. And if you would consider talking a little more about what you do and things that you know, if you would like to do that, I would very much like to speak with you.
Yeah,
about
my
it.
schedule is very busy.
All
The
right,
next
well-
couple of months of work, but probably towards the end of the year, probably, or
Cool.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
cool. But
Yeah.
definitely, when you feel as though the time is coming, like a month or so before, let me know.
Yeah, we will.
We'll
Yeah,
plan.
definitely.
Thank you so much for that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, has
Ray-
anybody?
Ray's
I
psychic
think we got
skills
another
were
question
used
here. Hold on.
too.
Okay, can you get a little closer or just talk real loud and give me your first name, please?
Okay, my name is
Really
Carl.
loud.
My name is Carl.
Hey, Carl.
Okay. And my question is kind of just with names, okay? People like Billy Myers, are these people included in your book? George Adamski, Alan Hynek of Project Blue Book. Then in 2017, the ATIP project, Harry Reid, Robert Bigelow, Lou Alessandro, and Tom DeLong, okay? Then you talked about technology. Where did the working microchip come from? Okay?
Okay.
So these people here have influenced me, where a person like Billy Myers had received knowledge where he prophesized things before they happened. So he claims he was in touch with the Palladians.
So what's your question then?
So my question is, where do these people fit into the whole picture as far as saying these people are on drugs, they're not telling the truth? So, some of it is, are we all being deceived? And that sounds to me like what you're trying to say, that a lot of us are being deceived, and a lot of the information that we're receiving.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Carl, I'm not sure that I can be the one to say that. I think we all have to kind of make up our own minds, ultimately. I don't think that... I've found that a lot of the material that's come from, say, the Tom DeLong stuff doesn't really resonate very well with me, but that's just me. Other people might say, oh, there's some really interesting stuff. It's just that much of what's come out of that has been, I have to say, the only thing I did like from the Tom DeLong material was the book, the fiction book that came out. If you ever get a chance, I think that book of fiction that they released was a pretty good introduction to the whole alien question. And I thought, oh, he incorporated this in the story. He hired a professional writer who had written, novels and whatnot. But that's pretty much the only time I've seen something from them where I've listened and kind of gone, oh, that's good. But every time I tune in to something that's, an official speech from DeLong or his people or whatever, they're kind of putting me on hold a lot, because I will say it's probably because they don't have clearance to say too much. I think a lot of who you're talking about have Air Force background, and I know that there is a big split between the Navy background and the Air Force background. The naval commanders in several cases have given lots of clearance. Tompkins said, I went to my old commander and said, can I tell my story? He says, get it out there. We need to hear it. I said, okay. So he did it. I don't know how much, everything has to come in little pieces. I'm finding that now. I've been looking around for more information. I'm seeing people holding back. And there's a reason for it. They say maybe there's an operation going on, they don't want to mess it up. Or maybe there's somebody holding a threat over that person at that moment saying, you can't talk about that or we're going to come get you. That happens too. So that's my take generally. I don't know if they're all bad, all good, there's probably a lot of truth to what all of them are saying. It's just I couldn't make a general comment.
Well, you know, there's people that we've interviewed here, the group, including Dr. Stephen Greer. Richard Nolan has said, Linda Morton Howell has said, at points say, well, that's what we can release, which we can talk about now. And I hear that in their various speeches or when they're writing something, and I'm seeing that there's like this, well, we can't go into that now. And I've heard that, and that always gives me this flashing light, like, why can't we? What is the deal? Is there an agreement? How do you feel? Do you feel
yes,
that too?
I think there is an agreement. I think there is if we gave you too much, then they would never get us information again.
Right, so you have to toe the line and give out some disclosure,
yes,
but there's limits. Do you feel that's true?
Or that they don't want you to give out this material now because it could be harmful to something down the line that they're hoping will have more of an impact.
Right. That's
that
true.
will be more significant.
One thing was on my mind too, I want to just, before we run out of time, and that is time travel. Time travel, which really plays into some of your questions here, as well as everybody you were mentioning. And can we go back? Can we go forward? Have we been doing that since the 40s? Do you have any, idea about that, or any feelings about what have we done, or so forth? Do you have any feelings on that? Montauk would be an example.
Yeah, that's right. I read David Wilcox's book, Ascension Mysteries, and while it's kind of it's fascinating, there's some interesting material in it. I had to say I laughed aloud at one point in a very mean way. I had to say is what he explained is he says, well, in Montauk they put you in a chair and shoot you through a portal. And it's like, oh wow, that's amazing. There's only one problem. They didn't figure out how to bring you back. Oops. It's like, okay, so it worked. Now what do we do? How do we get him back? Here it looks around like, no, we just shot him through the portal. So you don't know how to get him back? No. So it's like, can you imagine being that person being told, hey, wait a minute, this was supposed to be an experiment. You just shot me through one way, but didn't you get a round trip going for me?
Were they saying that they were going forward or back in time?
Usually back.
Back in time, they were saying that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just a fascinating subject. We want to deal with that later in the year.
Absolutely.
It really is pivotal.
We had that guy, what's his name, the fellow who talked about how I saw Barack Obama in the program. What was his name? Do you guys remember his name?
Bashada.
Yeah, that's
there you go. Okay. Everybody's had one turn. So what we'll do is we have about 15 more minutes tops, so we're going to go sweep this way. We're going to start reading with you, and we'll go, again, keep it one question, okay? One question, go.
In the early 1920s, there was a man named Thomas Townsend Brown. He did a lot of research on flying saucers, found that out of many different types of craft that he used to experiment electricity with to get them to rise in a vacuum, that flying saucer was the best. And he was going to do a talk in 1923 in front of the UN, but an MIB came and stole all of his notes. Have you come across anything else about that in your research?
Good question. Thank you.
About specifically Thomas Townsend Brown? No.
Yeah.
But you mean the kind of thing where MIBs jump in and do that kind of thing? Yes.
Both, yeah.
Well, yes, of course, obviously Tesla. Tesla's work was all stolen. His stuff was pilfered and given and sold to the Nazis or whatever. I mean, Wine argues that various elite in many countries were responsible for getting that material to the Nazis because they didn't care about. I mean, it's not like Rockefeller even put damn about his country. He was selling oil, selling whatever to the Nazis the whole time during the war, and so forth. And Ford was rebuilding plants at their expense in Germany. And it's like, oh my God, this is like, come on, let's get real here. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing. Sure. I mean, it's followed us around forever when you learn about it in history.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, please, come on up.
I just want to say about Tom DeLong, that's a business venture. They were giving out opportunities to buy shares. I got opportunities to buy shares. What they're going to do is then develop movies and different things on themes, and they're in great debt right now, at least that we know of.
Wow, that's good. I didn't
That's
hear
right,
that.
I did
But
hear
it's a
that.
business venture.
It's a business venture.
Money, greed, here we go, you know?
And it's
Making a business out of it.
military people and people in government, so it looks like it's more propaganda they're going to prepare to send out to everybody.
And yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to real quickly say the New York Times really seems to jump all over that story. Whenever they do a story in ET, it's always the DeLong business and Luis Elizondo and so forth.
It's control.
That's true. Please.
Well, this is very fresh in my mind. Going back to what I was saying about Warner von Braun. Warner von Braun, okay, had bought the property that John Brown, they actually knocked down his estate, okay?
Wow.
Stevenson bought the property, okay, and converted it into a church, okay? When I went to the library and I said to them, wait a minute, John Brown, this is his estate. They said to me, no. They go, that was bought by a church. Only to find out that Warner von Braun, okay, like I was saying before, he married a woman, her name was Quistrop. It's Quistrop. Okay, the other thing that's very strange about this property is that it's called Louisa Park, okay? John Brown had nobody by the name of Louisa in his life. The only one that did was Warner von Braun. Okay, not only that, the awning of this park looks exactly like the same awning that was used, okay, during the Holocaust. So I really believe, in my heart of hearts, that something else is going on this property.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's used. My point is, do you believe that other properties similar to this are going on the auspices of churches, when in fact they're not churches? Okay, they're going there because they are getting rent free. Wow. They don't have to pay taxes. Other things are going on, but they're going in the name of God.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot. I didn't hear that part ever. I never heard that. Did you have any feelings on that?
The answer is yes. Of course, I believe that. I mean, if you have the chance to avoid taxes, get free rent, free whatever, and you can bring your organization into someplace like that and swing it, and you line the pockets of somebody to get it done, you get it done. So yes, absolutely, I believe you. I believe that that happens.
We have time for 2 more questions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anthony Gunn.
Really loudly.
I'm Anthony Gunn. What is the significance in the entire kind of scope of the entirety of the ufology and everything that has to go with it? What is the significance of the city of San Diego, California? Because I just drove out there in like 3 days, and something was pulling me out there, and I came back, but I was just, if you know anything about that, like, is there any significance, anything that happened there, anybody that's there, or anything that may be like a UFO sighting, anything?
San Diego's a big naval base.
Yeah.
Big Navy. Navy is behind much of the UFO ET stuff. It's mainly a Navy organization. Something I like to point out to people is when you go to the defense budget that America sets for it, you think Army, Navy, Air Force, who gets the most money? Guess what? It's the Navy. Everybody's like, what? The Navy? What, you mean we send people out on boats to invade? We do not. We fly out there and bomb them. What's that all about? Nope, the Navy gets the most money. There's got to be a reason for it.
And wasn't there, not too far from the shore, underwater, a structure that we've seen pictures, it almost looks like a vehicle of some sort? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of near that area. Yeah, and there's been photographs of it. I don't know if there's any answers there, but it's not a natural form. It couldn't be.
I know in that general area along the west the West Coast, Pacific Coast.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's Vandenberg Air Force Base, and there's a lot of stuff they have to
Going
tell
down,
you.
and also there's been reports, I believe, I've been reading about sounds that people have reported that they can't explain
I
what
heard
those
that
sounds
too,
are.
I
So
was-
that's
I was,
another.
I was just with a group of people yesterday that knows all about that.
Right, right.
And you
Looks
could-
like you've had a
hotbed.
turn. Is there anyone who hasn't? Yeah. No, come on, Paul. Come on up. Get off the seat. Come on. Come on. Loud, loud.
Somebody was
So-
talking about those certain sounds for the last 2 weeks, and quite a lot of places that right now are being monitored, okay, because they're finding that sound kind of extremely unique. Besides being strange,
Yes, yes.
very unique, and they've been monitoring it. It started somewhere like about maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago, the one you're talking about, or he's talking about, just started.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question, okay? Have they solved a wonderful problem? Because this is the reason for what I became aware of what happened with the moon. That they found a lot of stuff that remains in stasis until it becomes exposed to Earth's atmosphere in any way. That's why they got rid of a lot of stuff. They didn't bring back spacesuits, part of the ships, and a bunch of other stuff. And they came across it every time they came back from a mission. They found certain contaminants on their ships, and they tried to solve that problem. And they still haven't solved it from what I heard last several years ago.
Okay.
They still have not. You tell me. Is
Okay,
that true
thank
or
you
not?
for your question. Go ahead.
You're asking about what the story is on problems that the rockets, the traditional NASA rockets had with bringing back anything, and they had to leave things there because of contaminants. I do not know what the official story is behind the secret space program's vehicles and ships that they use that are supposedly much more sophisticated than the rockets, which are not anti-gravity, which have much more higher technology than anything we could deal with. I would assume that, oh God, I almost feel like saying this. For some time, they probably didn't give a rat's butt what came back. If we were contaminated, if people were sick, if this was happening, so what? They die. So what? You know, life is cheap. I think all the people who were brought up there were a lot of people who were brought up into space who were brought up, the abductees or the workers. You're going to get promised a new job. You're going to get to go live out here. Everything's going to be fine. And by the way, the Earth is going to be blown up, so it's going to end. So you're going to be safe. And so they bring them to the other planet, and they're sitting there saying, well, at least we're safe, even if we are working like dogs. And so even if we are getting sick from whatever contaminants or whatever. So I just think that whole question is one of, well, human life up there in these programs isn't really valued terribly much.
So Michael, I got to thank you so much. On behalf of the group here, you gave an extraordinary talk. You absolutely did. You were asked back for certainly another talk later in the year when you can and when you have the schedule. But we want to, well, thank you. Guys, we can thank Michael.
Thanks for all coming out.
So this is Disclosure Network, New York, and we thank you for listening. And our website, once again, is dnny.info. And please give us your email, and we will get you on the list, and you'll get bulletins throughout the year of major topics of interest to us all. Thank you for tuning in. We're out.
Thank you, everybody.